So I wanted to share this with you. I keep feeling like I need to do some kind of YouTube channel. I haven't done anything, and honestly, there's a number of topics I could talk about. Something that comes to mind is basically sharing about the gospel. I actually have quite a few things I learned that are fascinating almost on a daily basis, and so I could easily talk about that. So what I wanted to talk about today was what I read on either Friday or Saturday. Basically, I read about the story of David. If you don't know David, he was the one who slew Goliath, very famous. It was a one-on-one battle. David was like a little puny, scrawny someone. Goliath was this mega giant that everyone was too afraid to fight. And so David throws this little pebble, kills him, becomes the hero of Israel. And at that time, there was the king. And, he was the hero because he won the battle. It was a tradition that they basically had. But the people really love him, and the king gets jealous. And, so it gets to the point where the king actually wants to kill David. He literally throws a javelin at him, and David just, says, "Oh, crap," and runs away. And, it happens a couple times. And there's a point where actually the king plots to kill David. And he escapes and isn't sure what to do and isn't sure who to trust, runs into Jonathan. I think he's one of the princes. But what's most fascinating, it's in 1 Samuel chapter 20, in my opinion, because it's like when you talk about critical, crucial conversation. I mean, this here is a life or death, critical, crucial conversation. David is basically in hiding for a little bit. He's determining whether or not to go to the king's dinner or feast. He can't offend the king because that would be bad, but he also can't be near the king because the king might throw another javelin at him or send his servants to kill him. And so David's trying to determine whether or not it is safe for him to go to the feast. And so he asks his friend Jonathan, who I believe is the prince of the king, if he can ask a very specifically devised set of words to ask the king to determine whether or not it is safe to go, which I think is pretty fascinating because it's like your life is literally dependent on your words in that situation. And so what he says, "And David said unto Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field unto the third day at even." So he's not going to miss dinner with the king, but he also has to hide in the field so that he doesn't get killed by the king's servants. Kind of a crappy predicament, especially, when it's like you're in a land where a king is in charge. It's like you're screwed. And I should use more proper language. "If thy father at all miss me, then say David." Okay, so David's telling Jonathan to observe. He just says, "If the father somehow determine if thy father at all miss me, then say David earnestly asked leave of me that he might run to Bethlehem his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family." So basically David comes up with a very, very legitimate excuse, and depending how the king reacts to that excuse will determine whether or not he can come back in the king's presence without being killed. So David comes up with what the king will probably say. And so David says, "If he say thus, It is well, thy servant shall have peace. But if he be very wroth, then be sure that evil is determined by him." So if the king doesn't care that he's gone, then he knows that it's safe to be around the king. But if the king is very wroth, then he wants him to investigate a little bit further and see if the king will still try to kill him. And so, if you're in a predicament where you're in a bad situation with the king, I hope no one's ever in that situation. 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 7 is kind of a pretty good guideline. I mean, he was basically, if you look at 1 Samuel 18:20, it says, David behaved himself very wisely because the king was getting more jealous. So he just had to be more wise. And then 1 Samuel 20, verse 7, it's like he divides these exact words for this specific situation, for this specific individual. And I just think that is so fascinating. Honestly, I really need to be more like that. Like, devise words specific to the person that I'm talking to. But I mean, that would just make life that much more meaning. But at the same time, it's like, I'm never going to be in a situation, but, well, I shouldn't say never, but, you'll never be in a situation where there's a king that's trying to kill you mainly because he's jealous, so you have to decide whether or not it's safe to go or leave, depending on the situation. And so, determine if it's evil by him. Therefore thou shalt deal kindly with thy servant, for thou hast brought thy servant into a covenant of the Lord with thee. Notwithstanding, if there be in me iniquity, slay me thyself, for why shouldest thou bring me to thy father? Yeah, it's kind of effed up because it's like he's basically asking the prince to betray the king, who's basically just has too much power and is jealous. And Jonathan said, far be it from thee, for I knew certainly that evil were determined by my father to come upon thee. Then would not I tell it to thee? Then said David to Jonathan, who shall tell me? Or what if thy father answer thee roughly? So basically, David has no idea why. So maybe he doesn't even know the king that well, but he's like, why is the king trying to kill me? And Jonathan said and Jonathan doesn't know either and doesn't believe him really. It's like, why would he do that? But they saw the king throw the javelin at him, so it's like, yeah, that actually did happen. Yeah, and so basically after that, they have their own little way of like signaling, it seems like, whether or not it is safe for David to return. But yeah, the most interesting scripture in that, and really like if you're in a really crappy situation, I mean, there really isn't anything more crappy. It's like, it's one thing if a president for some reason randomly wanted you dead, and you can't randomly want someone dead and get away with it because he'd be held, before a court of law and be found guilty and sentenced to prison. But if it's a king, it's like the people just automatically trust him, and he probably wouldn't have anything happen to him at all. And so it's really, it's a really dangerous situation. Like, it's not only dangerous, it's just crappy. Anyways, yeah. So I just wanted to share that with you. Next time you know someone that's in that situation, just slip them that scripture. If you have any thoughts or comments, definitely leave them below. But yeah, I hope to keep doing this. I just feel like I should. I actually had a lot more thoughts I could have shared with this. I made another video of this, but I don't know. This is like the shortened version, and I just want to try little by little at first, and then maybe more as time goes on. But yeah, tell me what you think.